Hello and welcome to episode 88 of PhotoKitchen. I'm your humble host, MD Welch, and today I'm accepting the challenge. The gauntlet has been thrown down. Many students, many colleagues, many friends have been asking for this video, so here it is. I'm going to do it. Bridge versus Adobe Lightroom Classic. Now, most of the time, this request of which application is better comes from Bridge users who I will say are a little aggressive by looking me in the face and going, prove to me that Lightroom Classic is the better program. It's a little aggressive, but I'm here to accept the challenge and I hope I could get through it unscathed. Now, I do want to say I'm comparing these applications on feature sets, not workflow sets. There will be people who say, well, I don't use that feature, so I don't think that that's worth me going from application A to application B. Fine. But I'm not here to talk about workflow that much. I'm here to talk about feature sets. What feature set is better for you? What application does what particular job better? That's it, right? I will talk about workflow and I will incorporate it, but we are really looking at feature sets here. So let's dive right in and talk about the major differences between these programs because they are significant. Adobe Bridge is a file browser. Adobe Lightroom Classic is a catalog-based kind of database system that's managing images. It's an image management program. Now, Adobe Bridge will show you the contents of any folder that you pointed to. Adobe Lightroom Classic has to have images imported into that program before you could ever see them. The reason why people like Bridge so much is because you don't have to import anything in there. Once you see it on your computer, you could just go ahead and click on any folder and it will show you the contents of that folder. And even better, it will show you the contents and previews of just about any type of file format out there, not just image formats. Adobe Lightroom Classic, it's image formats. It's Camera Raw, TIFF, JPEG, I believe PNG, PSD as in dog, PSB as in boy. That's about it because, again, it's an image management program. Bridge is a file browser. It is a file browser on steroids. It allows you or bridges the gap between Adobe applications, and that was always its intention. Now, it used to be called the browser, but it's important to point out that people didn't like Adobe browser so much that they made Adobe Lightroom Classic. Now, those who remember those dark days will say, well, maybe Adobe Lightroom Classic wasn't better, but that's certainly what they made as an answer to the criticisms of this browser that then turned into Bridge. But nevertheless, Bridge is designed for you to see the contents of a folder, where Lightroom Classic is giving you the ability to see a collection of images across multiple folders and multiple hard drives. And we'll see more about how that works in just one moment. As far as interface goes, this is splitting hairs. Bridge gives you the ability to customize the interface. I've already customized my interface here. I have a large preview window, a narrow area for my content or my thumbnails, and I have some other smaller panels here. But you can move panels around, you can get rid of panels, you could dock things together. It's very powerful. Things that I like about Lightroom Classic from a teaching perspective is that my students can't move things around. They're kind of stuck. It's a very rigid interface, and that's great when you're trying to troubleshoot things. Having customizable interfaces as a teacher is not great, but that's my thing. That's my workflow. So it's really splitting hairs as far as interface goes. The next major feature is how you're actually getting images into each program. And this is where Bridge is the clear winner, because if you already have files on your computer, all that you have to do is go up. Depending on how you want to do it, you could just drag a folder into the preview panel here. You could scroll up or down in your folders area here. Let's go up and let's click on this. And I could see the contents of any folder immediately by clicking on that. Fantastic. Easy. Lightroom Classic, even if those files exist on your computer, you still have to do some sort of import to see them inside the program. And I know many a Bridge user that absolutely hates that. That's why Bridge is better, and it is better in that sense. If you're a retoucher, if you're a graphics designer, if you're just looking at a set of images, if you're, as I do from time to time, doing portfolio reviews or reviewing assignments, Bridge is fantastic. You just get the files on your computer, put the folder into Bridge, and away you go. It doesn't get any easier than that. Lightroom Classic requires you to import files into there, and that is the thing that people hate. Now, what if you don't have the images on your computer? What if they're still hanging around on your camera or card reader? Both programs have an import function, and again, very similar as far as feature sets go. I'll start with Bridge. I'll go ahead and hit the Get Photos from Camera button. I think I actually already have that open. There we go. And I'll hit Advanced Dialog here, and I'll select my device, and There we go. It builds some thumbnails here. And most of the features or settings here are the same inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. We'll take a look at it in a second, but I could choose where these files go. I could choose subfolder for date. I could rename them on import. I could open them up in Bridge. I could convert to DNG, delete the original files. Never delete your original files. Make sure that you backed up all your information first. So never use that feature. And you could also in both programs save copies to new locations. So if you had to do some sort of redundant backup, all of that is here. Now there'll be somebody who will say, well, Adobe Lightroom Classic allows you to preview the thumbnails a little bit better. You can increase the size of the thumbnails so you could be a little bit more selective with it. Yeah, sure. But I'm going to be honest with you. This is where a feature set and workflow do kind of cancel each other out, because you should just import everything, right? You should just click all, import all, and then sort it out later on. That is absolutely the best way to do it in both programs. So the fact that I can't really see these previews, or sometimes they generate slow inside of Bridge, is irrelevant to me, and it should be irrelevant to you. You also have the ability to do basic metadata templates as well. And by the way, take note that this is a photo downloader. This is actually not inside of Bridge. So it's a component of Bridge. That kind of shows you that Bridge is not really dedicated solely to photography like Lightroom is. But you do have the ability to do a metadata template here. Inside of Lightroom Classic, you have metadata templates, but the one thing that does make Lightroom Classic better on a feature set is you have the ability to do development settings. Now, if you don't know about development settings or presets, this is a very powerful feature, because what you could do is when you bring a photo into Adobe Lightroom Classic is that you could have some features that you're always turning on or using automatically applied as a preset and have that applied on import. So for example, I always change my profile, in my case to camera neutral. I do a little bit of vibrance. I do a little bit of saturation to my images automatically, about +8 on both of them. I usually change it, but that's fine. I always do some pre-sharpening. So my detail panel has some pre-sharpening done, and I always turn on lens corrections. Now this seems very hyper particular, if not darn right anal retentive. But the amount of times that I've forgotten to turn those things on or forget to turn those things on is significant. I don't have to worry about it. I also don't have to do it. So that's a nice feature that Classic brings to you in Lightroom, where Bridge doesn't have that feature. So if we're talking about feature sets, you got to give it to Lightroom Classic for the fact that it just gives you a little bit more on import. But again, if you're just looking at files that are already on your computer, Bridge is the clear winner there. And one last feature that I almost completely forgot about is the ability to do tethered capture inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. Now, I'm not going to dive deep into this because this is not a tethering video, but it's safe to say that having tethered capture in Lightroom is a huge plus compared to Bridge. Now, again, if you're not using tethered capture, that's fine. That's a workflow issue, but this is a huge asset for those people who do shoot tethered, and Lightroom Classic has it, Bridge does not. So let's move on to our next category, and that is organization and finding files. And this is where Lightroom Classic is going to clean Bridge's clock. There's no comparison here. The feature set is huge. Bridge has a lot of issues because it's only looking at one folder at a time. So if you wanted to see contents for multiple folders, you can't do that in Bridge easily, or you can't do it natively. Also, another thing that I have found inside of Bridge every now and then is it doesn't actually preview files correctly. I have reloaded images inside of here. This happens every now and then. I think it happens on relatively big images, but I will get PSD icons instead of actual thumbnails. I can't actually see what this image is. Now, what's interesting is I've rebuilt caches, I've dumped everything, I've even reinstalled. It always seems to happen on a few sets of images. What's interesting is inside of Lightroom Classic, I don't have that problem at all. In fact, if I go to that particular folder here, you will see that I have my PSDs. And by the way, the PSDs themselves do load into Photoshop just fine. It's not a corruption issue. I don't know why that happens in Bridge, but it happens to me all the time. And by the way, if you are a Bridge sensei or some sort of Bridge maven and you know why this is happening, please let me know in the comments field, because this is a really annoying feature. And certainly it has to be something that I'm missing, but this does happen time to time from Bridge. But that's minor compared to the fact that I can't view multiple folders at a time here. So let's say, for example, I wanted to view this and I also wanted to view this folder at the exact same time. I could click on both of these and have them highlighted and see the thumbnails from two completely different shoots. I could also click on an entire folder right? So if I had several shoots inside of several different folders, I would have that here, from my lovely serial killer chainsaw series all the way down to lifestyle, corporate headshots, and so forth and so on, including Santa Clauses in a river doing fly fishing. But I could see all of these images at once, and you might go, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, it just makes it easier to search, right? I could click on multiple folders of maybe a similar subject and search or pare those things down. But even more important is finding things after the fact. Now, this is what I say to all of my bridge users. What would happen if somebody called you up on a phone and said, hi, I'm from such and such publication, agency, tourism board, what have you. I am looking for your best shots of snowshoeing or fly fishing or just outdoor recreation. How long would it take you to pull up those images inside of Bridge? I'll tell you how long, because I have actually been running a search using a smart collection in Bridge for about an hour. It's been an hour, right? I've actually recorded this video twice. I didn't like the way it sounded the first time. So I've started recording again, and it's still looking, and it looks like it literally just wrapped up at the same time that I just was kind of complaining about it. So nope, it's still going. It's still going. So if I jump back over into Lightroom Classic and then I click on all photographs, it's going to show me everything inside of my catalog. And I don't have to even do that. I could search just by folders or subsets of folders. And do take note, I have multiple hard drives here. So not only am I searching across multiple folders, I'm searching across multiple hard drives. I'm going to come up to my metadata panel and let's start with attribute. Let's search for 2 stars or higher. And then I'm going to come in, and I've already done this before, so I have outdoor selected. So there you go. Now, if you're like, well, you already did it before, so you have to do something different. No problem. Let's do snowshoe, because I know I've done some snowshoe stuff before, and I brought it in. Let's see. Let's find it. I got to just remember how I pronounced it. There you go. There's snowshoe, right? If it's fly fishing, which is across multiple folders, that's no problem. Let's come up and find fly fishing. There you go. And now I have my fly fishing shots here. Instantaneous. Now, this is because of the catalog. That thing that people who love Bridge, that hate Lightroom Classic, they hate the catalog. But this is what the catalog brings you. It brings you quick, accurate, fast search. Now, you have to do the metadata work. You got to do the ratings or flags or color labels, whatever you want to do. And you have to have your own system and you have to be consistent with it. But this is significantly faster than Bridge. And if I was using Bridge, I would be waiting. I would have to say to somebody on the phone, well, yeah, let me get back to you. And I don't know when I'm going to get back to you because I got to wait for this whole thing to search or stop searching. But in Lightroom, I've done this while I've been on the phone. Yeah, I have about 4 images. I'm going to go ahead and send them out to you. I'm usually exporting the images before the phone call ends inside of Lightroom Classic. I'm not doing that in Bridge. Now, again, clearly as a feature set, Lightroom cleans Bridge's clock, right? But if you're not using this or you don't have that problem, this is where workflow kind of comes into it and where Bridge people will just simply say, well, I never have to do that. Okay, that's fine. You never have to do that. But if you ever have to do it, it's serious. Now, I will say there are Bridge people who will say to me, well, once you build these collections and it gets done searching, it's done, right? It's cataloged. It will find it really quickly. And as you add images, it will add to it really quickly. But the problem is from my perspective, as a commercial editorial shooter who sometimes sells these images, I don't know if somebody's going to ask for fashion or if they're going to ask for something from the fall. But no matter what they ask for, as long as I've done my metadata correctly, I can quickly find these files and get those results to them much quicker than I can with Bridge. And that could be the difference between making a sale, getting a new client, or missing that opportunity completely. Lightroom Classic is clearly better than Bridge in this regard. So the next set of features we want to talk about here is image editing or development. Now, both applications handle this almost exactly the same. Why? Because they're using the same development engine. It's Adobe Camera Raw. Now, in the case of Bridge, the easiest way to do this is right-click or control-click and go open in Camera Raw. You could also go up to the menu bar if you wanted to use that. By the way, you do not have to open it up in Photoshop. If you didn't know that, this is a top tip for you because you can keep Photoshop closed if you're just doing raw editing here. And I could click on open it in Camera Raw and it will go ahead and open it up in Raw. And if you compare the features or options inside of Bridge to Adobe Lightroom Classic, you'll see they're pretty much identical. The interface is a little bit different, but everything is there. You have snapshots, you have history, you have all of your controls. It's really nice. And that's great because if you are using both of these programs, you're not fumbling around with different interfaces or different names of things necessarily. There are subtle differences, but not enough to really take up time inside of this video. What's also nice is that you can play around with images in both programs and have the program see that. So I can make an adjustment to exposure here, hit Command S to save it to the metadata, hit continue. This is not saving it to the computer, by the way. This is just updating it. And if I come inside of Bridge, I'll hit cancel here, and then I'll open this back up in RAW. It doesn't do it in real time, but you'll see that it's honored the exposure here, and that's really nice. And it does work both ways. Very nice. Now, there is one major thing, though, that Lightroom Classic does that Bridge does not. I'm going to hit cancel here. Let's say that this particular camera raw file, I wanted a black and white version of it. To do that, I really essentially have to make a duplicate, or I could do some sort of double XMP file. I've read about this in Bridge, but I will tell you the workaround is not, it's not there as a menu. It's a workaround, right? And a workaround is not a feature set. Inside of Lightroom Classic, this is a little bit different. I could come into here, I could right click on this and choose something called Create Virtual Copy. Now, when I do this, I will actually get a second file here, right? So here's my first image, here's the virtual copy. And then I could come into here and I'll just hit D for develop, and let's just make this black and white. There I go. And so now I have a black and white version and a color version of these images, and I could use keywording and labeling so I could separate them for exporting. Very powerful, very neat, but I still only have one file on my computer. What's even better is that I can do this to PSD files. This is a PSD file here, and if I right click on that, I cannot open this up in Camera Raw. But if I'm in Lightroom Classic, I could come into the PSD, I could go into the develop module, and let's just, for lack of a better reason here, let's just do a little bit of color grading. Let's make our shadows very, very overdone. Let's do a little bit of mid-tone here. And let's do a little bit of highlight, way too much, but you could see this. So I could color grade my PSDs inside of Lightroom Classic using the exact same engine and feature set that I have available for my raw images. And I can do this to a PSD. And even better, I can right click and I can make a virtual copy of the PSD. And then I'll have my new image here and I could choose which one I want to do. I'll just come into this one. Let's go into develop. Let's just hold down the Option key and reset this. There we go. And now I have multiple versions of the PSD, but I don't have multiple PSDs. Now, there'll be Bridge users who say, well, yeah, but now you've increased the size of your catalog. My response is, the feature set is there. It has a better feature set, and even that increase in size of catalog still doesn't outweigh how much more editing I could do after the fact. Now, also there'll be Bridge people who say, well, you could take the PSD, you could open it up in Photoshop, you could make a smart object out of it, and then you could go ahead and you could do a Adobe Camera Raw adjustment as an adjustment layer to this. And my response is, you've just opened up Photoshop. You're no longer in Bridge. I don't have to do that in this program. I don't have to do that in Lightroom Classic. So virtual copies make Adobe Lightroom Classic far and away a much better editing experience. However, I will say to workflow, if you're just doing retouching and that kind of stuff, it's highly unlikely that this is ever going to be a feature set that you would use. But if you are doing photography, how often have you needed to deliver a black and white of a headshot and a color of a headshot? If you're using Bridge, you're going to have a significant workaround or more files that you have to manage. If you're doing Lightroom, you have virtual copies, you're clicking on a preset, you get your black and white, and you're done. When it comes to exporting, again, this is probably going to be a little bit more of a hair split than anything. I think Lightroom Classic wins the export, but it's very, very close. So first of all, both programs will allow you to export out just about any file that you want to. I will say that Adobe's export features overall are not nearly as good as other programs. Adobe could radically improve this, but I could select multiple images in both programs. In the case of Lightroom Classic, I'm going to come up, I'm going to go to export. I could actually access presets here if I want to, but I'm just going to come up to export and I can create my own presets. And I could have these uploads, say, to Dropbox in a folder called print and a folder called web. And I could specify these and go ahead and say batch export and send them out to wherever that I want to. Now, this is a little bit better than Bridge. Bridge does give you almost all of that. You can come into the export panel here. You can create a preset. You could put your own information in. You have just about all of the same options and features that you have inside of Lightroom. There's a few differences, but it's not worth getting into. But the problem here is you can't do both at the same time. You could drag to web and let web run, and then you could drag to print and you could let print run, but you can't do it to both. I don't know if that's really worth, the big deal there. But yeah, there is a subtle difference. And if we are talking purely about features, as I said I would, then Lightroom Classic gets it by a nudge. Also, even though that I don't do it, like once I'm importing or exporting, I don't use Lightroom for any other function. I just let it finish. You can run inside of Lightroom and continue to do work if you wanted to. But I think it slows down Lightroom so much, it's not really worth it. So which application is best? Well, I don't think I've convinced anybody. I don't think I've really made the hardcore Bridge people come over to Lightroom Classic. I think what causes people to leave Bridge and come over to Lightroom Classic is the organization function of it. I really believe that if you're searching for hours to find images and it's costing you time and it's costing you money, maybe even clients, that's going to be a reason to go over to something like catalog-based like Lightroom Classic. But I think if you're entrenched with Bridge and you absolutely love it and you despise Lightroom Classic, and by the way, I've just described every Bridge user that hates Lightroom Classic. They hate it. It's not that they've chosen, they just hate it. But if you hate Lightroom Classic and you're using Bridge, I think you're going to continue to use it. But I can't stress this enough. I use both programs. I like both programs. And speaking of I hope you've liked this video. Even if you don't like Adobe Lightroom Classic or Bridge, I hope you've liked this video. I hope that you subscribe to the channel and share this with fellow friends who might be debating about these two programs. Until next time, I'm MD Welch wishing you all the best from PhotoKitchen.